Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Bad Occult Podcast, the podcast where we do, or at least talk about inadvisable things in the name of magical science. As always, I am Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow, and with me is...
Felix S. Warren. I ain't got a punchline this time.
No punchline this time?
No line has been punched.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that we were going around punching lines.
That's what happens.
You just punch the line?
That's the line you give when someone punches you. That's the end of the joke.
A punchline?
That's gotta be what it's gotta be, huh?
Oh, I feel like you just psychically punched me in the face with that.
Oh no. Well, that's not something I can do over here. Because over here, we can't do certain extravagant magical things.
No.
Over here on Earth.
No, not on Earth.
It's not a fun place for that kind of stuff.
Mm-mm.
But there are other places where there could be that kind of stuff.
Ooh.
So, we've talked a bit about, we've got a few guests who come from space. They're on a spaceship. And there's different things that are possible over there.
Right.
Now, we haven't really talked about, there are other planets.
Mm-hmm.
And, though Earth is not officially in contact with people from another planet in a way that everybody on this planet knows about through the news media or something,
Ooh.
there's nothing that can prove, there's nothing that can disprove that there are planets out there that are inhabited by other people.
Right.
Whatever kind of beings that they are.
Right.
And, I mean, if you do magic, there's so much astrology in it. You're already dealing with other planets, sometimes other galaxies. Stars. And, there are actual, things like galaxies and nebulas identified in... old and ancient astronomy and astrology. It's just that, maybe they didn't know what to call a nebula, but they could tell some big thing was there.
Mm-hmm. So, magic in space.
Magic in space. I think magic from space.
From space.
I really do think magic from space. We have a very important guest today.
We do. We have a new guest.
And
we also have a new switcheroo.
That's right.
This time, Felix is sticking around.
That's right.
And I'm going to be channeling our guest.
So, I want to talk a bit about our guest before he gets here.
Oh, no.
I don't want to bore him with stuff that he already knows. And you also were there for when some of this was happening.
Right.
So, the thing is that this guest I have worked with, / talked to, communicated with, for years now.
Yes.
And during that time... For the most part, neither he nor I were aware of what the hell was actually going on the other end of things.
Yeah. This is very much a pen pal where neither of you are actually aware of the actual location of said pen pal.
Yeah, it's like whenever you get one of those balloons that has a little postcard that says, write to me at this address. Except that whenever I got one of those balloons, I kind of assumed that the person on the other end was from, floaty sky realm or something. It's like, oh, you must be up in the clouds. The balloon came from the clouds.
Right.
And when I began talking to him, it was kind of early on in some of my working with spirits and especially demons.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I was kind of trying to figure out early on was what even are demons, and what is their experience like? And I said something very early on that was this became one of the most interesting relationships that I ever had with a spirit, because the spirit didn't believe that I was real.
Yeah.
Like, I was, like, from the perspective of, like, so how do I even prove that you're real? And I get the reply of, well, you're not real. Like...
How do I know that you're real? You're just a voice in my head.
You're just a voice in my head, and you're not producing any visual results on my end of things. You're not making anything happen. You can't make magic happen, apparently, so how can you be a real spirit? And I'm like, whoa. Now this is really real, because if there's someone on the other end who may or may not even believe in me, that's the most realistic thing that could happen. that a spirit wouldn't believe in physical people. Which is kind of what I thought was going on for a while.
Right.
I thought I had found an atheist spirit. It's gotta be one.
Right.
And it turned out that just because someone is coming across as a spirit doesn't mean that they're not living a physical, real existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. Our guest today comes from a place where physics work differently.
Yes.
It's still a physical planet somewhere in what I presume to be is our universe.
Mm-hmm.
It operates under physics. It's just that because their planet is different, the physics happen differently.
Mm-hmm.
Even just your planet being a different size than Earth is going to make the gravity dramatically different.
Right.
Maybe make the orbit from the sun different. Time's going to happen differently, sunlight exposure, all of that. And so over on his planet, they can like do more cool things with magic because their physics are better than ours. They just have better physics.
Better physics.
Better physics.
I don't know if I would say the physics are better. I would say chemical composition.
Chemical composition, definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that physics are a part of it. I think there's a little bit going on with like gravity, or some kind of temporal distortion that is happening.
Right.
That I feel is like you'd use physics to explain it, but it's taken a long time to even get to this point where we're talking about him being on another planet.
Yeah.
And like years and years ago, I was basically just trying to figure out, like, how do I read tarot cards to understand this guy better?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been quite a journey.
Real tarot card that tells you that, hey, this guy is an alien, actually.
Yeah, I mean, world reversed. Maybe the Chariot, but he's not in a UFO. That's the thing, is he's not in a UFO.
Right.
That's one of the clear indicators that someone is a space alien, is that they're in a UFO.
Ah.
But when they're not in a UFO and they're on a world that's just enough like yours that, like, it kind of seems like, it's like, oh, well, you're not a space alien because
you're terrestrial.
Maybe you're
in an alternate Earth reality.
Maybe you're back in time. Stuff like that.
Right.
And it takes a while to like get to that point where it's like, oh, this could be another person on another planet.
Mm-hmm.
My telepathy could be doing that. Their telepathy could be doing that. It's hard to comprehend the amount of distance that telepathy could cross just because two people have mental powers that make it happen.
Right.
You whenever you have like movies that have like people from other planets, there's always some kind of technology that's connecting them, or a big magic rock that makes a very glowy portal.
Yep. Or some other kind of like portal magic or something external. Like, no one really thinks about the fact that, like, the entity that you're connecting with telepathically in a spiritual sense could be fucking terrestrial alien on a planet like tens of, maybe hundreds of light years away.
Yeah.
I don't even know how close the closest star is. I don't remember.
I know it's, I think it's Alpha Centauri. And it's still, like, it's quite a ways away.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to get there in our lifetime unless there was a multiplier of light speed.
Yeah.
So this is the ultimate pen pal.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot conceive of a way of meeting this person face to face, or could I? Dun dun dun.
That is the magic of channeling. You're about to meet him kind of face to face, I guess. Yeah.
It is face to face. It might not be the face that he was created with on his planet.
But the viewers aren't going to know that because they're going to see your artistic rendition.
That's right. Beautiful portrait.
Beautiful, beautiful portrait.
It just showed up before my eyes.
So, anything else you want to say in preface before I head out?
I think that's it. I think that covers all the bases.
Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the visuals. And
first time you switch on the podcast.
Yes. All right.
I'm not narrating anything, but Ben is coming over.
He already shared my name and everything.
I'm so sorry. I'm not used to doing this part. He has this whole list of questions he asks people. And I'm a guest on my own podcast. All right, well, what's your name/nickname?
Magus Ben.
There we go.
But my friends call me Ben, and you called me Ben, so you're my friend.
Aw, you're my friend too. That's why you call me Felix.
That's right.
Or any number of things. So, what is your gender identity?
He, his, for now. Can't change. He, they, I guess, if you want to be, more specific.
Thanks. Where you calling from?
Well, I guess we've been calling it Mageville.
Yeah, I figured.
I mean, like, in my society, we call it Terra, or Earth, but apparently, like, there's 2 different planets that both call themselves Earth, so...
That namespace is occupied.
We can't do that. So... Mageville.
And, what is it that you do?
I am a mage. I am specifically a scholar of many different types of magic. And I mean, I take on few students, but most of it's independent research. Up until a few months ago, I had my own little tower, but then it got overrun by owls.
Oh no.
And so I had to move locations. Because I don't know if anyone's tried to get, like, nesting owls out of, like, an attic area, but you just give up the place. Once 3 or 4 have moved in, it's really weird because, like, apparently, like, owls on your planet are more solitary.
Yeah.
But there are what we would call owls, and they look similar enough, but they're a little bit more of, like, a grouping for, like, safety and stuff because there's some bigger animals in the area. And so once you get 3 or 4 of them starting to nesting pairs, it's like, yeah, you can't you can't get rid of them. They're like bats with claws and beaks.
I'm very sorry that your home is gone, but that also sounds really cool.
It's not cool when you start getting owl droppings and pellets all over, like, your rare manuscripts and shit.
That's not where you want those.
No. So, yeah. Luckily, I've had a few friends that, they had one of them inherited a manor house that needs some cleaning up anyways, and they had an alchemy lab that apparently had been abandoned for a few years, and something was growing in there. So, yeah, they called me in to help out, and also were like, can you just live with us for a little while since your owl problem has gotten out of control? So, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
That's what you're doing right now.
I'm cleaning out an alchemy lab.
Alchemy?
No.
Sorry, it was right there.
So horrible.
So, let's see.
I've just sort of jumped into, a lot of stuff without explaining, because I know this world doesn't have the same metaphysical plane, auric, A-U-R-I-C, auric, senses that, my planet does. And after talking with you and some other people, nice enough to, like, let me talk to a couple of spacemen, figured out that our planet's actually in, like, some kind of nebula.
Yeah, you're gassed up.
Yeah.
You are beyond the veil.
We have 2 moons. We do have a sun, but we don't actually see it very well because of the gases that are in our atmosphere, and apparently filtered down enough that we have a slight hallucinogenic reality, like, constantly, which means that we can see into the auric field a little bit that most of you guys on this planet can't see. So our technological development diverged very quickly, because if you can see and read the auric field, there's a lot of things that you can do with psychic work and basic, like, telepathy, telekinesis, things like that. You just get instant feedback of whether it worked or not, because you can see, even if you don't actually lift the object, you can see where you're interacting with the auric field of, like, say, a rock.
Right.
Like, you could see that your psychic essence is able to move out and manipulate the auric field of the rock, whether or not you're able to lift it or not, or move it or anything. Whereas, in this planet here that you and Tyler are on, you can't see any of that shit.
Not very well.
So, and not, like, as a norm.
No, like,
so,
it really sounds like you've got a planet where you actually have a manual on how to do things.
Yeah, and, like, the ability to, like, visually get that feedback, and I mean, being able to interact with things on we just call it a magical level, but it's basically on an auric level, means that we're able to sort of skip chemistry.
That makes sense, because you don't have to do a lot of tests to find out what a substance is if you can just read its aura.
Yeah.
And get that indicator.
Right.
But
unfortunately, that means that we've neglected a lot of the, like, applied sciences. And so I would say, technologically wise, we would be in sort of considered a medieval era. But because we are able to manipulate with stuff on a metaphysical level, I don't know, I'd say early industrial revolution, but without the spewing out coal fumes.
Yeah, because you can get power without having to burn a lot of shit.
Yeah. So, which, I mean, like, the whole reason that I'm able to explain this on this level is because, like, you and I, we've been talking for fucking years about all of this, and, like, obviously I would call myself a scientist, if science was actually recognized, where I'm just constantly experimenting, learning, testing things, and yeah, like questioning, finding hypotheses. Like, the scientific method has been revolutionary for like the way I do research, and I've taught a few of my friends, like, and so we've been actually applying that, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad it's been a lot of fun. So, you basically had enough... The auric field was doing enough for you that you didn't have to apply the scientific method for much of anything?
Yeah, well, I mean, for, like, the stuff that we do as mages, it's like, you don't have to guess at it, because pretty much... we call it mage sight. Like, every person that we know of has some form of mage sight. The better you can see it but still distinguish physical reality, I guess, the higher chance you are of being a good mage. Because, like, some people, all they can see is auric, and some people, they can barely see it. So, there is that bell curve of, like, yeah, you could see auric really well, but you're running into things because, like, you're expecting, someone is able to glamour and shift the aura 3 feet to the left, so you're running into the table because you thought it was 3 feet over.
So...
that's an extreme example, but...
it sounds like an overlay on top of physical vision.
Yeah.
Can you concentrate and it recede? Or...
yes, that's what I mean, like, being able to, like, sort of dim it, have control over it is something that you kind of learn pretty young. It's sort of like learning how to throw auras, or, like, auric, like, fake auras and things like that is something that you learn pretty early in childhood. It's involved in a lot of, like, kid games and stuff, where it's like hide and seek advanced level, where you're up in a tree and you've, like, got a fake, auric impression of yourself that's hiding, like, under a bush.
Right.
So if someone does, like, a basic scan, they'll think you're over there instead of up in the tree.
Neat.
Just a basic example. But so learning, like, how to manipulate your aura and, like, manipulate other auras is something that most people learn very early on, whereas, like, you guys in elementary school age, you learn your times tables. Math isn't really, like, that big of a deal.
And so this is where we diverge, because the stuff that you learned in your world's kindergarten is incredibly interesting to me.
Yeah.
Some of it is still, like, new or unknown to me. Whereas timetables are boring and a nightmare to me. You're actually interested in math.
Yes.
That makes you different amongst your society.
Yes. Yes.
Could you speak on that?
I don't really know what to say. Like, I guess, when you're able to, like, enchant a carpet to fly, trying to figure out how to make an airplane is kind of seen as silly.
Yeah. And so you don't really have to do much of the math over here that we have to do.
Right.
To get
to
stuff
figure
off the
out,
ground.
like, aerodynamics and, like, propulsion and things like that. And electricity, like, we don't have that. It's all witch lights and, will-o-wisps and glow bulbs.
It's really interesting because on your planet, you've talked about how basically it doesn't get dark.
Yeah,
like, there's kind of natural light around.
It doesn't get totally dark, and it's from, like, talking with Rob and Mantis and some of the others, and, like, understanding how space compositionally is. It's because we have a sun that is fairly close to us, But because of the positioning of our planet in the nebula, we don't really get the direct sunlight. We get like the bounce fade of the of it lighting up the gas cloud that we're in.
Yeah. So you're like in concert fog lighting.
Yeah.
Permanently.
So.
And so there's like a lot that you seem to be able to do over there with light.
Mm-hmm.
Make projections.
Yes.
Make false lights. And so over here, like, I think the biggest technological drive has been how to not set your house on fire and still have indoor lighting.
Right. Whereas, like, we try to figure out how to make dark enough places that we can, like, sleep comfortably for, like, 6 to 8 hours. I would say it's sort of akin to really bright auroras. That's been really fun to learn, like, that you guys don't have them all the time.
Yeah, because, you talk to the people from the ship, and you learn a lot about space and the stars.
Yeah.
And you can't see stars from your planet, right?
No. So, yeah, being able to, like, I mean, you've been really cool and, like, taking me outside and being like, okay, here's the stars here. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about this aspects of astrology. And I'm like, oh, because, like, outside of our, area, it's sort of, I guess you guys would call it feudal mercantile era, or like type of economy where it's like we don't have really big cities or a bunch of people together as a norm. So a lot of it is bartering and trade, and there's not much, and we don't navigate by the stars because we can't see them.
You don't have anything like that there.
Yeah.
Now, do you have like magnetic compasses or anything?
No.
Interesting.
Lodestones are actually more charged with like high energy places. Like you could follow them like to where there are places of high energy, and I believe Mantis has theorized that we have local magnetic anomalies because of the gaseous composition of our atmosphere.
So you have a different distribution of...
Yeah,
because over on Earth, like, deposits of, like, very strong magnets, like, that's in high demand for all kinds of technological applications. But, like, our magnetic field, the strongest magnetic points you're going to get are at the North Pole and the South Pole.
Right.
And that's kind of how you get compass navigation to begin with. It's going to point to one of those.
And we also have 2 moons that sort of circle the planet in asynchronous orbits. A lot of these things I have learned how to describe recently. But those do exert some pull magnetically, especially when they're in alignment. They can actually throw a lot of things off if you rely on magnets, or what we call lodestones. So one of my friends actually inadvisedly decided to build his little place that he was staying at. I don't know, it was a combination between like a castle but with only one tower kind of thing, on a lodestone that was floating, but apparently it only floated for like a 50-year period, and then once the moons moved apart enough, the magnetic convergence that was keeping it afloat wasn't there anymore. So yeah, he kind of dropped about 50 feet to the ground in his house.
How did he do with that?
I mean, he had precautions in place because with the lodestone sort of like swaying in high winds, stuff would fall out of his cabinets and shit. So he's had basic like anti fall spell wardings. So it just basically he warded all the stuff but not himself. So he ended up on the ceiling for a little bit.
Got insurance on your house but not your life.
See, that's another thing that, like, we don't have. Like, we're not organized enough to have things like insurance. Like, it's basically his stuff was... All the gawkers came out. A couple of people, helped to put his stuff back together and take it off the lodestone. It took about 5 of us mages to, like, get enough oomph to be able to move his stuff. Because it was, like, a freaking stone mini castle that he had built like an idiot, and so it took like about 5 of us to move it, but yeah,
when it takes only 5 people to move an entire stone castle, flood insurance isn't so much of a concern, I think.
I mean, 5 is a lot because most like wooden structures, unless it's like incredibly big, probably just needs 1 or 2 if you're skilled in that sort of like levitation, transportation type of work. It's psychokinetic, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, telekinesis.
Yeah. And being able to set it down. Especially skilled ones can, like, they sort of show off in that, like, you have a full table set for dinner and nothing moves, even though the house is moved 50 feet. So, yeah, there's, like, specialists in these areas that do stuff to show off. But, yeah, it took 5 of us, which means it was a pretty heavy building.
I can see why it was considered foolish, then, for him to build it like that.
Uh-huh.
Your special physics can only do so much.
Yes, our special physics can only do so much. And, like, certain things that, like, experiments that you guys are doing on Earth, like with the CERN or the Large Hadron Collider, where you're doing super magnet stuff, that wouldn't really work because of the magnetic interferences from what I'm assuming are iron-based moons or planetoids that are circling us.
Oh yeah, if they've got like an iron core, yeah, you wouldn't be able to do any of those experiments nearly so reliably. You'd have to probably do them, like, for one, you'd have to develop a space program, and then after that you'd have to do them out in space. To develop a space program on your planet that can't see stars.
Right? Like, everyone's like, there's nothing out there. So, now sometimes, like, I have several of my friends that sort of indulge me in this, and, like, they can tell there's something more out there than just the clouds, and like, obviously the light has to come from somewhere, but, like, it's kind of hard to explain, like, the view from your planet, when all you see is cloud.
Yep. Like, it's amazing just how much, I never thought of Earth as being, like, really special in some regards. Like, I kind of thought of stars and planets as being pretty default, and some, like, a lot of people actually think they're really boring, so boring that they don't even care if they don't see them.
Yeah.
And so, like, finding out that, like, seeing constellations, seeing shooting stars, that's something I might not have somewhere else.
And I mean, like, in another way, this makes our planet very isolationist, because, like, we don't know, with the shifting magnetic fields and things like that, like, you can't really have fixed points oracally. You can have like very strong magical points, but they can shift, like ley lines and stuff. We do have to redraw those. And like, I mean, if people are able to move a completely stone castle with 5 of you, you can shape the land pretty easily if you've got a dedicated crew that know what they're doing. So, and without the means of navigating by fixed points like the stars, there's been a few times where you've asked, like, beyond my little country, whatever, how many other people are on the planet, and it's just like, we don't know.
My goodness.
Like,
yeah, how would you establish that?
I mean, like, we do have, like, a ruler, we call him Emperor, but he does get some foreign, dignitaries that come along, but that's something that they deal with in the capital. It's not really something that, like, we don't have much interactions with outside of our usual social group, I guess.
It makes a lot of sense.
So, like, I don't honestly know how many people are on our planet.
I mean, until recently, neither did Earth.
Like, I don't even know how much of it is covered in water. Like, you know how you guys have, like, be able to see or estimate how much of it is water, even back in, but you need clear view of the sky to be able to do those mathematical calculations, to be able to figure out even the circumference of the Earth.
Yeah.
Like, you need clear shadows from a sun that's unobstructed. And we don't have any of that.
Your planet is living in Plato's cave allegory.
Yeah.
That's... wow.
Yeah. So, like, it's really interesting because there's some things that, like, I take for granted, or, like, people from my planet take from granted. And then talking with you and coming over here and experiencing, like, this reality that is very different from my own, like, it makes a lot of sense why you guys would go in a very different direction and have incredible things like a laptop that you can connect to, like, I mean, anyone else with an internet connection instantly.
Yeah, I've been able to talk to people across my planet since I was in high school.
Yeah. And, like, I mean, we have to, like, know who we're aiming for if we're doing something telepathic or have some kind of, like, token or focus stone or something. And that's part of the reason why it's very hard for us to expand outside of our social group or outside of, like, maybe some university connections. But you have to basically make that connection in person and then carry the focus stone back with you. Like, say if someone was coming from another country, they'd have to carry that back with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then place it somewhere, and then, like, that university can communicate with the other school.
Interesting.
It's usually how the connections are. And those things degrade over time.
Right, that makes sense.
So, and it's not something we haven't figured out, like, instantaneous movement of teleportation, I guess, over longer distances. Like, I think the farthest that we've had someone be able to teleport is about 15 feet.
And after that, it just doesn't work? Or it's just too dangerous?
You
made a face, and so I'm guessing it was dangerous.
Well, let's just say we don't understand enough about the atomic level integrations that, especially if you're passing through a very strong auric field or a very magically loaded area, I would say the force of magnets, magnetism overrides the atomic bonds.
So you've basically got, like, random
atomic shredders.
Yeah, these conditions are the ones that we usually talk about over on Earth. We talk about this happening in space, like in, places where you're not protected by certain magnetic fields.
Right.
You've got them basically on your planet.
But, like, it's... As long as you don't destabilize your own auric field or atomic, you know, like, you don't try to discombobulate yourself and recombobulate somewhere else, you should be okay. But even then, like, you don't go into places with, like, wild magic, which I understand now is more like just weird magnetic forces.
Radiation storms.
Yeah, magnetic storms.
So, over there, when does one start learning magic?
When you're born, or before you're born, actually. Because you are... while you're gestating, I guess, you start... once certain things start connecting, you start exhibiting your own auric field, and it's usually second or third trimester. And so a lot of the times parents will have a psychic connection with their, you know, the carrier, at least, will have a psychic connection with the child that they're carrying by, you know, eight months at the latest, because we have similar gestational time. So
yeah. So you said carrier. Can you do surrogacy?
We could do, like, I guess because we're able to understand stuff about the auric fields, like, there is a level of potion craft that you, I guess, on Earth, you only really see in, like, a D&D, like, fantasy concept. I could completely change my gender and, you know, the internals, everything, so that I could carry a child.
Right.
So, like, we just call him a carrier.
Instead of worrying about mother, father, etc.?
Yeah.
And that's just kind of... culturally, you've been saying carrier for...
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so, like, usually the carrier is going to be one of the people who raise the kid. But there are some who just, like, you know, carry and then let someone else take care of it because they're really good at doing that. Or, like, some people, they can speed up the gestational period so they only take, like, 6 or 7 months instead of the normal 8, 9, 10.
Press fast forward on pregnancy.
Yeah.
The dream.
Which also means that they don't establish as much of a connection with the child psychically, because the first person that usually, you know, kids while gestating will reach out to is, you know, the carrier, because it's the closest person. There. So, being able to just sort of, like, not establish that much of a connection, or in some cases they have, like, focus stones and stuff, so the kid will end up connecting with the parent through the focus stone instead of the carrier. Yeah, some people are just able to gestate for 6-7 months and then be fine a few months later and start again.
Wow.
So, and, like, it really is more of, like, it takes a village type of philosophy when it comes to kids. Like, a lot of them, if they're about the same age, they get grouped together to learn from each other. You know, we've got probably, like, what you guys would call grandparents, that kind of age, would, like, watch them and teach them some things, but mostly they just run around and scream and get dirty.
As most children do.
And then about 15, 16, you know, unless you're in a one of the nobility or highbrow families, you get apprenticed, and by that point you've tried 2 or 3 different things, and what's available, or one of the kids would just be obsessed with the blacksmith and already be helping out, and so by the time they're 15, 16, they'll do a formal apprenticeship or something. So
neat.
I mean, it's really interesting. It's sort of like free range, parenting type of thing. But when you're wanting to learn more about higher maths, it's a little bit limiting.
When did you start wanting to learn about higher maths?
So, in conversations with you and a couple of other, like, Earth people that I had ended up getting in contact with, I learned a lot more about, like, probabilities to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And scientific method does involve, like, taking down notes of results and things like that, and like being able to assign things to numbers and sort of predict whether or not certain reactions were going to happen. Like, say I throw in I do this in a magical field that is a near, like, wild magic area that is known for random shape shifting. If I threw a rock of a certain type in there, how often would it change, and what type of thing would it change into? Once I started keeping track of that, then I could start charting out probabilities, and then being able to sort of, like, say that, with a sedimentary rock, 50% of the time it just turn into glass.
Mm-hmm.
And then 25% of the time it would just explode into sand and dust.
Then you'd find out whether or not it was even worth doing this anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and just, like, being able to track that along with the auric, like, field, and the ability to just sort of, like, be far enough away but not actually be able to see the actual rock, but watch the auric field of it change, to be able to tell that, okay, I can go in there and grab it, it's turned to glass, or no, I'm going to have to leave it alone because now there's a dust storm. And I'm going to have to vacate the area for the next 15 minutes because those little tiny grains of sand are sharp.
Oh, dear.
Because they're, like, half glass. So, yeah. So, finding out that mathematically, once you do an experiment a certain amount of time, you can, like, sort of predict with more accuracy how something will happen. It makes for better note taking. Like, you're able to compress that whole explanation that I gave into a page instead of, like, 15. And I mean, we already have alchemical, like, equations that we write that sort of shortcut a lot of that. But being able to bring in some of the math, integers, like x equals whatever, just being able to do that mathematically has been very fascinating for me. So a lot of my study has been focused on sort of trying to integrate that scientific mathematical notation and sort of square it with the alchemical notation that has already been established. So a lot of people think I'm crazy because I'm just, like, staring at numbers. But I do have to say, I try to avoid spreadsheets when I'm here because I get incredibly jealous.
Oh, yeah.
Of the mathematical capabilities of your technology.
It does all the calculations in it. You don't have to...
Yeah. Like,
yeah, you don't even have a slide rule over there.
I mean, we've got abacuses and things like that we could use, but nothing so sophisticated. Like, not even like a simple calculator that you just type in. So, yeah, like, I think I feel like we are woefully technologically behind based on what I've experienced here, but in other ways, there's like things that I like casually talk about, like, oh yeah, been talking with my partner about who's going to be carrying our potential kid, and you're like, wait, there's a choice? So, those kind of conversations don't really come up over here because you guys aren't really able to magically change your gender.
Yeah, it's like it really depends on the particular couple or throuple or whatnot.
Yeah.
Whereas over there, the bodies are available for all kinds of operations, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that when I'm complaining about how much technology is unavailable there, your technology has started to kick in.
Our automatic litter box is being automatic.
Ooh.
Well, it'll be done in a bit.
Yeah.
So, speaking of things that you get to have over there that we don't.
Maybe we should wait until the horrible audio is done.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to make this sentence last a real long time.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to make the important part only be audible once the thing stops.
Yeah.
But until then, we get this wonderful cover dialogue.
I'm going to write down.
Unplug that thing before we start next time.
No, 53 minutes in was when that stupid sound was. There we go.
Yeah, good. We can get that out on the later edition.
Yeah.
So, speaking of things that you have over there that we don't, tell the audience about Close Enough.
Close Enough! So, because we are able to interact with auric fields and things like that, gravity isn't quite as big of a, limiting factor. If you get something most of the way onto the table, if it starts to slip, if your hand's away, you naturally, by the time you're about 5 or 6 years old, able to push it back into place. I say years, but we don't really have those over there. We sort of have a temperate climate, so we do have seasonal change. We don't have a very harsh winter, but we do have that, and everyone sort of celebrates yay, we survived a year. We're a year older around the same time. So
communal birthdays.
Yeah. So we don't have individual birthdays. We don't really have calendars because that relies more on stars and sun. We don't.
Yep.
Timekeeping. Don't have that. So, it's very interesting to try to plan something for 3 days hence, versus 2 months later. What people consider a month can be very different depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, on Earth, different cultures attract time differently. But being on time for things was actually not a big deal until, I'd say 16 to 1700s. You started having these big empires that were managing colonies in other countries, and for the important people to meet each other, they needed to actually be on time. They were really getting tired of just standing around for 3 hours for the other guy to show up.
Or 2 days.
They would agree on the same day, but...
Yeah. We can't even agree on the same day or how many days are in a month, because some people track it by the movement of one of the moons, which is about, if we take your standardized time, it's about 38 days for that one to cycle. The other one is about 25 to 27, depending on how close it is to... The smaller moon moves a bit faster, but it can be influenced by the larger moon. And then there's some people who are just like 2 fortnights.
Oh, so your 2 moons and the planet are a 3-body problem.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so... like 2 bodies rotating around each other, you can kind of regularly get an idea of what they're doing. But with 3, and them all having different size and gravity, it's extremely hard to predict where any of them are going to be. And so in physics, they just call it, the astrophysics, they call it the 3-body problem. And
part of the issue is that we actually have some, I guess you would call them imperial mages, who are specifically tracking the moons to make sure that they don't run into each other. So and the easiest one to manipulate is the smallest one, which is part of the reason why it's like 25 to 27 days. If like the imperial mages decided that they needed to bump the moons apart a little bit, it would mean that the cycle of that small moon would be longer or shorter. So
that would change your timing.
Yes. So, yeah, that's some facets of that I don't think you guys would have to deal with.
So, I think there's 2 types of time tracking I know of that don't depend on that. One's the atomic clock. I know you're not doing that. But the other is the vibrations of quartz crystals. That's usually in watches and timepieces.
No, I don't think anyone's gotten, like... Part of it is, like... I don't think anyone's really worked on the mechanical side of that. Like, we don't have very fine mechanical,
instruments that would register it?
Not even register it. Like, watches have a lot of little gears and things, from... what I've seen of the watches.
So you don't have a lot of clockwork?
No, we don't have clockwork.
Wow.
We don't need clockwork. Nobody's had to figure out how to do that. And also, clockwork, usually to keep it running long term, you need some metals, and most of the metals that are available are susceptible to magnets. So with the magnetic fields, the electromagnetic fields just kicking up, like they would, gears would go out of sync. If it's a particularly bad time, if it's an electromagnetic storm that comes through, metal stuff can actually start flying around.
So is it dangerous to have metal stuff?
It can be. That's part of the reason why some of the things with the auric field is to sort of like imitate a higher level of attraction than you would get with magnets. But most people do use a lot of wood and stone things, and anything that you have would be, unless you're actively using it, if it's metal, you would have it locked up in an armory or somewhere where, like, if a rogue storm came through, like, geomagnetic storms you guys have, like, because the nebula intersects with our atmosphere a lot more, it allows a lot more of the electromagnetic action to happen closer to the surface of the planet, instead of like thousands of miles up where the aurora borealis is on your planet.
Right.
So the electromagnetic storms can just rip through. And I think that's part of the reason why we don't have a lot of the metallurgy technological advances in those ways, is because can you imagine working on a clock and then just having all the pieces like strewn across your room because like a stray, photon hit your house just wrong and started a mini electromagnetic storm?
So do you have any warning for when these electromagnetic storms happen?
We usually do. Like, they're usually accompanied by a light show because the photons and the things are hitting the gases in our atmosphere. And so a lot of the times there are wild magic areas are defined by the different like light shows that are there. Like the one I was describing earlier with the rocks, it's a very orange red zone. And it's pretty stable. So that has been why it's been an area that I've learned how to do some of the probability with, because it stayed pretty stable for the 10 years that I was working with it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So in an inhabited area like a town or city, whatever it is that y'all really scale to, is it possible for an electromagnetic storm to come through that populated area?
It's less likely. Usually, what people do is get lodestones or, you know, anything that's got a magnetic sort of aura. Certain types of materials you can actually enchant to become more magnetic, or like, magical resistance. But usually what they do is they plant sort of like lightning rods, but for electromagnetic, and it just sort of keeps it in that area.
So you're basically taking the storm and making it stay somewhere?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's sort of the basis for a lot of like wild magic areas, is that that's where someone or something naturally has buried something that sort of is attracting the electromagnetic, like, or photons or whatever that's causing the magnetic storm.
So, wow, that's your weather, basically.
Yeah, that's what our weather is.
So you can control the weather. But at what cost?
Cost of metal.
Yeah, sounds like.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things that I do appreciate that you've mentioned that the physics is different, is because like your magnetic poles, your magnetic field is so stable, like it does mean that you have very stable physics, but with like magnetic anomalies, it would be understandable why like some of we can't get consistent like measuring equipment.
Yeah,
and
you
I
don't
think,
have consistency.
Yeah, like it's very interesting that like your scientists are able to just set something out and know that it's going to consistently measure a certain like thing.
Right.
And it's not going to like implode.
Which measures a different thing. Notes, instrument imploded.
Magnetic field destroyed it. So, yeah.
So you'd start with magic before you're even born.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, let's say somebody's like a carrier. Do they need to stay out of electromagnetic storms?
I mean, it's a good idea for pretty much anyone because but like, there's some people who believe that after a certain period that the child should be, if you get subjected to one of those storms or wild magic or something like that, that it could affect the child in positive or negative ways. Like there's a lot of superstitions and things, but not much like actual data.
Yeah, to purposely experiment on this probably bridges against an ethics wall, I'd say. I hope.
Well, see, we don't have... That's another thing that is very different in our reality. We didn't have, like, an overarching religious bent. Like, I feel like a lot of your history has been Christo-Judaic.
Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian, where there is a God, there's set of rules and things like that that you need to believe or not believe, and, like, everyone has, you know, for the most part, some kind of understanding of an outside influence of rules. Like, it's a lot more individualistic, and when, you know, something completely outside of your control in the form of, like, magic that you can use and is a part of you, but if it gets too concentrated, can rip everything apart. Like, you sort of develop different viewpoints of the world.
Yeah, I guess the Earth understanding of deity is very based on, like, the causality of Earth.
Yeah, separation, like someone from...
The belief in a beneficent God is the one that lives on a planet that doesn't have random-ass magnetic storms on its surface.
So, yeah, I mean, there's, like, I guess, people who worship different types of entities, but it's more, like, smaller scale than that. And so ethics is more determined by the group of people that you're in with than by, like, an overarching, like, we all understand the sanctity of human life, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, sanctity of life and just saying human is very strange as well, because we recognize, like, animals, what you guys would call animals,
right,
as, like, living, breathing, sentient entities as well. So it's more than, like, just humans are on top. Like, we don't believe that. I mean, I literally gave up my tower because a bunch of owls moved in, and most of the problem was because they were, like, fucking yelling at me at night.
Got yelled at.
Like, I'd yell at them for pooping on my shit, and then they'd be like, well, you're in our place. Like, this is our house now.
And so when...
It's mob rule.
When they would communicate that, would you hear that in people words, or would you hear their owl hoots and understand it?
It's sort of a combination of, like, understanding, like, their mannerisms and, like, the hoots and stuff, and a low-level telepathy.
Yeah.
Like, these guys are sort of a hive mind in that they do become smarter in a group because they can diversify, like, labor.
That makes sense.
Division of labor actually really helps with establishing a hierarchy in intelligence. If, like, one person has to, like, take care of everything, you know, cook, eat, gather wood, build shelter, all that stuff. Even if you've got, like, mage powers, it's still a lot of energy, and it doesn't leave you a lot of time to, like, think about things. And, like, you know, consider, you know, navel gaze, I guess is the best way to put it. But, you know, it also, we see a lot more socialization between diverse groups of animals because they are able to have a level of communication that I feel like isn't really on Earth.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, like, because you're able to connect on such a psychic level even before you're born. Like, there's an innate sort of sense of self and also a sense of connecting to others. But since the other can also include souls that have passed on, or souls that have yet to be born, like, that sort of shows a difference in our consideration of, like, what we would consider sacred? Like, I don't know, they're, like, ethics is a very interesting space.
Yeah, it is. Like, on Earth, there's a big taboo against interacting with the dead.
Right.
But the dead usually can't telepathy us real strong with regularity over here. Like, I get a lot of communication from the dead because I have a real interesting thing going on with me.
Right, but it's not...
But most people don't.
Right.
And so they freak out about it if they get it. Whereas on your planet, if you get more regular communication from that end, then there's not going to be so much of a taboo, I'm guessing.
Right. And I mean, similarly, there's no, like, taboo on, like... There's no, like, animals are lesser than humans. Even though I don't... I believe we serve a similar ecological niche to humanity. Like, I think we've had similar evolutionary backgrounds, but I don't know if I'd call myself, like, Homo sapien, because, like, the biology is very different.
It sounded like it.
But, like, we're similar enough that, like, I can basically, you know, we got 2 eyes, a nose. Like, the way you drew me is pretty accurate. Like, yeah. But there's, like, less differentiation between, like, animals. And there's some who take on or, like, exhibit just more of the animalistic. Like, I have an affinity for cats. I do see better at night than, like, the average person. There's some other things physically, like, I actually have retractable claws.
Oh, neat.
So, yeah. And sort of more of, like, cat paws than hands. It's sort of a hybrid. It's kind of hard to describe. But yeah, those kind of things exhibit, and so there's much less of a divide between humanity and animals.
Yeah, because you've got their traits.
Yeah.
Are there animals that are a bit more human or something?
Yes. Like there's not... They're not as interested in, like, some of the stuff. Like, I haven't interacted with too many of them just because I'm more interested in the study of magic for magic's sake. But, like, there are guardians who are, like, I would say bear-like. You know, their purpose in life is to guard an area or to guard a family, you know, and they sort of grow up alongside, and, like, that's just one example where they sort of become a part of a village, and their job is to sort of, like, protect from, you know, because with the wild magic, people, animals can go mad, or like just, like, become so disoriented they just lose all sense of self and things like that. So you do, it's, I mean, sort of the equivalent of putting down a dog because of rabies. You know, it's just going to be bad. So some animals, like guardian bears, essentially, just, you know, pick a town and that's their town, and they guard it.
Try to stop them.
Right? You won't. So yeah, I feel like I've ranged a lot of places, but I hope this would be interesting to your viewers.
I think
it will listeners.
It was interesting to me, and I'm sure it'll be interesting to them.
So,
it's always interesting. This is not going to be the last podcast you're on.
Oh, I know. I've already been told that I'm gonna come back.
You've been told.
I've been told.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to tell people about really anything?
Don't take your stability for granted, I guess. Like, be willing to consider things that might seem impossible to you. You just might be looking at things from a very stable perspective. And I think that's applicable for pretty much anyone. Like, your personal circumstances just reflect your level of personal stability. And, being willing to entertain, just talking with you about how physics are different from our worlds is probably, or just led into our conversation about ethics. I'm very glad that you're willing to listen, because there's plenty of people on my planet who just, I come from a university studying background, and there's still some people who are just you're just way out there. This is all thought, this is all thought experiments. Mm-hmm. Except they don't really use those words, but it's the best one. Flights of fancy. And it has no practical application here, but it does. And so even considering how much your viewpoint can change based on your personal stability, whether mental, physical, whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I've got.
I think that's good, and I think anybody out there can take away something from that, no matter what planet they're on and how the physics work.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to head out so Tyler can come back and you guys can do your wrap-up stuff. So,
yeah.
Thank you again for having me.
Later.
Oh, right. Ugh.
That was a lot of fun.
I'm really glad. And Tyler, I am officially back on the visualizer. He did a lot of talking.
He did. I asked a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, he always likes answering your questions. I know.
I really, really appreciate it. I've often, when talking with all manner of spirits, I've asked about social mores and ethics, curious as to what they are, and he's always had a lot of interesting answers for me. And there's stuff I've learned from this conversation that I have to think over for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm getting cliff notes of things, but very interesting that you guys ended up talking about ethics.
We would go there. At one point I thought he was a demon.
Yeah, that is true. And he did question your existence, which means he was thinking about things whether things are a part of his own mind or outside of it.
Whether I am just a flight of fancy.
So, yeah. Wow. That was quite the episode, and I'm sure I'm going to be reviewing that, listening to that later on. And I'm sure we'll have some stuff to talk about. We always do. So, anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
I guess, if anybody else out there has been having similar situations to my own, where they're talking to a spirit, they're communicating with something out there, and they're wondering, is this even real? This seems kind of far out there. Consider, is there any risk to just believing it, to rolling with it? consider the possibility that it's real, and then think through, like, what does that imply?
Yeah.
Does this actually break any rules of physics?
Right.
That's, one of the biggest... I didn't really ask him while he was here. I'll have to ask him another time, because we've already talked about it quite a bit, but you can cast Fireball over there.
Oh my goodness.
Now, whether or not you should is a big old question, but you can cast Fireball over there.
Right. I mean, just as being able to talk about the auric fields and, like, being able to see them consistently is a very interesting thing in and of itself. And we've had a lot of conversations about how much that would change if we were able to do that on Earth.
Yeah, and just, like, how dangerous it would be.
Yeah.
It's like a thing I've actually argued with people about before, is like, you say you want to be able to cast Fireball, but do you really want everybody else around you to be able to cast Fireball? To potentially
be able to cast Fireball.
If you get it, everybody gets it.
Yeah.
Do you want everybody to have Fireball? I think the answer is no.
No. So, yeah. Definitely, I really love Ben's closing statement about, like, being open to think about things that seem impossible. Because, like, just being able to entertain that is expanding your mind. And even if you decide that no, that's not possible, even considering it means that you've strengthened your reasoning ability, your basic logic, connections, and determination skills, which is honestly, I think we could do with a little bit more thought and care and logic in this world. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but I think that's about all I have to say, unless you have anything else.
I have a lot to think about, as usual, after I talk to Ben. And I hope that everyone else gives what he said some thought.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is just one person from one other planet.
Oh yeah.
Think about the possibilities that are out there in the universe.
Yeah.
It is kind of a miracle that he and I managed to end up connecting and communicating.
Yes.
Usually, even on his planet, that has to be a very, very deliberate thing. And my radio must have been on at just the right time. So just think about what could be out there, how much of it could be out there. There's lots of possibilities.
And if you want to communicate those possibilities to us, you can always reach out to us on Bad Occult Advice on Tumblr.com. We do have the Ask Box open. If you do want to send an email instead, maybe you're not on Tumblr, maybe you don't understand the wizardry that the wizardry that's involved in creating a Tumblr account, we totally understand. So we have an email address as well, badoccultadvice@gmail.com. Feel free to send emails to that. We are on Spotify, Apple, Substack. We are still working on the RSS feed. Felix is banging his head against the keyboard trying to figure that out. So eventually we will have those audio-only versions available. But right now the best place to be is Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you. We do our live streams. We also announce on Bad Occult Advice on Tumblr if we're having issues or anything like that. We skipped last week because stuff just got crazy. So, and then we have audio and visual backups on YouTube of them, so you can see the nice visualizer, including the lovely, lovely drawing of Ben that Felix did. That was up for most of the podcast today.
Yeah, I really think the best experience of the podcast right now is on YouTube, and that's a nice way of saying that, yeah, I didn't get the RSS done yet, and I really wanted to, and I didn't.
Speaking of another thing that we haven't gotten done, Bad Occult Apothecary is still on vacation. We're working on it. It's become a little bit more of a, like, figuring out how to get things packaged properly. Weights is the biggest thing, is because, like, the difference between ground hawthorn berries and non-ground hawthorn berries is like a package size. So we're trying to figure out more standardized packaging to make it simpler for us to just ship that stuff out. But when we get that up, we will definitely announce that on the Tumblr and also on the podcast. So, or you could just go on to Batakult Apothecary on Etsy and favorite the shop, like the shop. I don't remember. Yeah, I think it's following the shop and liking it. And you'll know when we actually take it out of vacation mode.
That's right. You're going to want to line up for that.
Line up, because some of the stuff is limited quantities. Once it's gone, it's gone. Because it's already rainy, wintry season around here, so our hawthorn berry supply, our naturally dried hawthorn berry supply is already gone.
We've got some in stock, but it's not going to last forever.
Yes. So, all right. Well, that's been another episode of Bad Occult Podcast. Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you to Ben, our special guest, for showing up. And thank you always, Felix, for joining on this ride.
It's been quite a lot of fun.
And we will see you in the next episode.